again to episode 6 of the Women in EdTech Podcast. I'm your host, Tisha Poncio, digital learning specialist at Wakelet, and I'm so excited for our next guest. Today, I have with me Yaritza Villalba. Say it again, Yaritza. Are you there? Nah, there it is. See, you say it much more beautifully than I do, so I think I'm just going to let you introduce yourself from now on. I really wish I could say it that way. I have been watching you for so long. I think it was actually Flipgrid that brought us into the same space. And I remember before the pandemic, I think, listening to you just share about your story, about your background, about everything that you've done, everything you've learned, your story of your mom, and then students. One of the things that you said when I was watching you I feel like that's been like 3 years ago, but one of the things that you said that really stood out to me was we have to give every kid the opportunity to learn. And you do that by discovering who your students are. And that was so powerful to me because I've shared a little bit about my background with you. I wasn't sure that people were really taking time to do that when I was growing up. And so I think that's why that really stood out to me. But I'm going to let you tell the audience a little bit about your role, your background, your passions, and maybe your current role or anything else you want to share. So you have the floor.
Hey, so my name is Yaritza Villalba. I've been an educator with the New York City Department of Ed for the past 12 years. 11 of those years I spent in the classroom teaching U.S. history to underserved students and overage and undercredited students. So my students were ages 14 to 21. A lot of my years in the classroom was spent with trying to figure out how can I tie in students' interests with what I was teaching, right? So being honest in my approach in teaching U.S. history, but also having this unbiased lens and making sure that all students are heard equally in the class. And then my last year, this year, I'm spending it as an assistant principal at a totally different school, but I'm learning a lot of restorative justice approaches. This is going to be my final year with the Department of Ed. I think I'm going to say this here first. I'm actually moving on to working with Flipgrid and Microsoft.
I can't believe I got the scoop. I feel like Oprah.
You got the scoop.
I got the scoop. I have been waiting for that announcement. I will just tell you for a really long time. The funny thing is, I think when I announced it, I went with Wakelet, you commented the exact same thing to me. You said, I've been waiting for this announcement. I was like, you have been? That's so exciting. I am like thrilled for you. What an incredible addition to their team. And you know, I always have been a fan of you, but this is like so exciting. This means I get to see you more often.
Yes, a lot more often.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's go ahead and just deep dive into some of the questions I have for you. Because I feel like your voice is just so powerful and you teach all of us in this very graceful, gentle way, if you will. I mean, I feel like you were teaching me long ago, but over the course of the pandemic and all the things that have sort of developed over those years, I just feel like you continue to have this really strong, foundation for teaching all of us a perspective that maybe we don't know. So that's really what we want to focus on this episode. So I'm just going to deep dive. We're going to talk about critical race theory, equity in education. And so I want to know, and I really just want you to define it for our audience. What is critical race theory?
So before I define it, I think that it's necessary that I just hone in on the fact that a lot of people in America is totally against it. But it just brings about awareness of racism, right? Within all of the institutions that exist within America. Sure. And for the past few years, because this is something that has been around for over 40 years, it's just now become a buzzword to most, right? So for the past few years, it seems like it's dividing America because folks are just not getting down to understand just how simple it is to acknowledge that this exists within this nation.
Right.
So when we think about critical race theory, you want to think about this framework that basically just says systemic racism exists and it's a part of American history. It's a part of our society, whether we look at housing, whether we look at employment, whether we look at healthcare, whether we look at education, it exists. And for the past few months, a lot of states are showing that critical race theory is actually a fact. It is true. It exists within American society because every time you turn around, they're banning books, right? Every time you turn around, you're looking at the populations of people, Black and Brown, who are not getting the actual services. When we think about COVID testing, when we think about just getting prescription drugs, when we think about what communities does it affect the most, in the sense that they're not actually getting to actually get those resources, is Black and Brown communities. And that's just what critical race theory is. It's not saying, you know, American history is just destroyed. It's basically saying we have this systemic racism that always existed and we need to acknowledge it so that we can move forward as a nation.
Sure. I thank you for that clarification. Truly. Well, what do you believe are the biggest misconceptions? Because you're right. There are a lot of people out there that automatically are against it. And I think it's because they have heard it as a buzzword in a negative connotation, maybe, or on social media. So can you clarify some of those misconceptions out there for our audience?
I'm just going to touch on what I've seen on social media, because most of my friends actually agree with me that this is the truth, right? This is the nation in which we live in. And I think that as a Black and Brown woman, as a Latina, I have to acknowledge that this is how it's impacting the people that not only do I service, but I work with. So it's the idea that racial inequities don't exist. When ding dong, we know that it does. When we look at the higher mortality rates, it's Black Americans. When we look at who's more exposed to housing, and especially in more affluent communities, it's not Black Americans. When we look at the school to prison pipeline, it's more Black and Brown young women and men actually not graduating high school and going directly into jails, right? We know that when you look at the 3rd and 8th grade standardized testing scores, Black and Brown children are the ones who are impacted the most. And that's how they decide to actually create the jail cells in prisons. So there's this notion that people are just picking up all of these facts and are just saying America is racist, when the fact exists that a lot of this country's foundations have been racist ideals. It has been where, you know, people are denying affordable housing to Black people. Black people are dying in much higher rates than white people. And the reason is because of lack of healthcare in our communities. And so it's just the idea of, well, if we're not going to acknowledge that racism exists, how can we really sit down with each other and have these conversations that, I get it, they're very uncomfortable to have, but they're necessary, especially when everybody's pushing for equity.
Absolutely. Well, that brings me to my next question. How do CRT and equity in education differ?
So when we think about equity in education, you want to think about the amount of resources, I guess, being available to both Blacks and whites. When we think about critical race theory, it's basically acknowledging that Black children don't have access to those resources. It's not saying we need to give both resources to whites and Blacks. It's saying we have to acknowledge that there's a group of people who have not been getting these resources. How do we continue to move forward as a nation when we know these people are not able to push forward? These people are not able to access that. Black women are dying more, giving birth to their kids. Black women are being pushed more to get C-sections. Why are we not having these discussions when this is something that has always existed? So especially in a classroom, you know, teachers always state that they're creating these lesson plans and these unit plans with all children in mind, but we know that in most classrooms that don't exist. I had a conversation with teachers at my school today, and it was more about culturally responsive teaching. And the idea is that, you know, even if I created a lesson plan 2 weeks ago, but I step into my classroom and something isn't clicking, it is your job as a teacher right then in that moment to make whatever change is necessary so that you can have multiple entries to that lesson plan. And that's what you want to think about with equity, right? How are you truly designing these resources, these lesson plans, these unit plans, these STA planners to meet the individual needs of the student? With critical race theory, you're going to want to look at how do we catch everything that has impacted and affected Black communities because of racism and due to racism, and we make those things better. Mm-hmm. How do we really tackle this idea of school to prison pipeline? It isn't just solely focusing on the fact that the school to prison pipeline exists, but how do we maneuver around it so that kids don't constantly have to be funneled through that only channel?
Right, absolutely. You brought up culturally responsiveness. I happened to catch this tweet from South by Southwest, and it's from Dina Simmons. I'm not sure if you know her.
Yeah.
And she says you can't be emotionally intelligent without being culturally responsive. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you think about that.
I agree wholeheartedly. A lot of the work that I've been doing the past few years have been around culturally responsive teaching. Is this idea that I can't be invested in my daily practices. I can't say that I'm going home and I'm planning for students if I'm not actually thinking about those students. Mm-hmm. If I'm not taking the time out to get to know their names, their interests, what do you like to eat? What kind of music do you listen to? And a lot of the conversations that I have with folks, they believe that being culturally responsive means I have to play rap in each class. It's not true, because not every Black and brown student listens to rap, right? So it goes way beyond just a genre of music. It goes way beyond the movies that we teach. I remember a teacher once said, if you look at the movie Bad Boys, mm-hmm. you have these, you have Martin Lawrence, you have Will Smith, they play detectives, but what role do they play? Like beyond detectives. They're the detectives that break every rule that technically as a detective, you're not supposed to play. So what does that say about Black and brown people? You have to look deeper into the stories that are being put in front of our students. And if you're going to really sit there and present it, then you have to allow for multiple perspectives. And that's exactly what culture responsive is getting to know your students beyond just what they look like.
Wow. I love what you just said. Say that one more time for our audience. That was so good. The different perspectives. Oh my gosh, we got to go back and watch that because that is quotable. That was powerful, powerful for me, but you're right. It goes back to getting to know our students. And I have always said this, I've been in education I was 21 years in the public classroom, before I went to Wakelet. And one of the things that I think naturally I did because of my experience in the classroom and feeling like I was the odd person out all the time, was really focused in on getting to know my students, getting to know about their lives, not just what I thought I knew, but what was really happening in their lives and their backgrounds and their families. And I really will always go back to that no matter what my role in education is. I think relationships are so important because it builds the trust, just like you said, so that we can then have those conversations, right? I mean, it really does. I saw it happen in my own classroom last year. I had students that came from all different walks of life and had completely different political views and life experiences and backgrounds and different languages. And they sat together because there was this culture of trust, and they actually had a conversation about what was happening in the world. And I just remember being so in awe of that because we have so many adults that are not able to sit down and do that. And these kids were 16 and 17. So it gave me a lot of hope for the future, I will tell you. So next, I just want to know, when we're talking about equity in education, what do you believe the biggest solutions will be for that? Like, what do you see happening in your ideal world?
That's so difficult because realistically speaking, this world is not just, rainbows and unicorns. I think that folks have to really get down to the nitty-gritty and realize that real change needs to happen, right? So to date, we have 25 states that actually introduced these anti-truth bills where folks are not able to actually read whatever books they want to read. Folks are not able to teach classes. You have some states where teachers have to submit lesson plans before even teaching those lesson plans. And so in the ideal world, I would love for folks to be able to just teach the true fundamental facts about the United States. Facts that I believe, as a history teacher, it was like expected of me to know when I was going through my bachelor's program. And of course, some people don't have that same experience with getting their degrees, but also as a person who is a citizen of the United States, but also I was born in Panama, it's imperative that I know what's going on, right? Because I know that at one point the United States actually had full control over Panama, right? So it's more of, well, Mom, how do you feel about that? And what's going on? And what's your perspective, right? So that when Mackenzie grows up, I can answer those questions for her as well. And so in my ideal world realm, it would just be for people to be totally honest. And it doesn't matter if it's brutal, right? Because it needs to be that way. If not, we're going to constantly have these discussions about race, and people are going to constantly push back and be afraid of the truth. I usually share with folks that at one point, my school, the school that I was teaching at before, we were supposed to go to Ghana. And a lot of the preparation for that was discussing things with the kids in Ghana about education. And one thing that came up was the fact that their textbooks told almost like an untold or untruth story about enslavement. And it was difficult for my students to really have that conversation with the students in Ghana, because it was just like, hey, we were all enslaved and now we're here. And this is why some people live over here, some people live over there, you guys live over there. And then when you really do the digging, you realize that most of their text is still colonized, right? Someone is still choosing and picking what is it that folks are learning. And that's exactly what's going on in America. Even though people are saying, the First Amendment, we have freedom of speech, we have the right to press, we have the right to petition. We really don't, because there's always going to be pushback. And those radical pushbacks are what has us in this position where there's 25 states that are saying you will not teach this, right? So it's difficult. It's difficult to have these conversations, but in the ideal world, I would just want folks to actually just be honest.
Absolutely. Well, you are an author of several books. And so if our audience does not know that, we're going to list that in the Wakelet collection in the notes so that they can go grab any of your books. But I want to know, out of all the books that you've written, which one are you the most proud of?
Oh, hands down, Mackenzie's Time Machine.
I knew it. Tell me why.
When I created the other two books, it was based off of the needs for my students to pass standardized tests. So I knew that I had to create something that they would enjoy learning with. I had to create a resource that even when I leave the school, they can still have access to. And creating those interactive notebooks, at first I did it and it was just like, wow, the kids are truly writing, they're connecting. And then I was like, let me just publish this, because if my students are having success with that and it goes way beyond the textbook, then maybe others can as well. With Mackenzie's Time Machine, this spoke to just the true essence of the information that I want my daughter to grow up knowing. Sometimes as parents, especially while we're still learning, what should we teach our kids and what we don't want our kids to know, I'm just like, I want her to know everything, because I want her to have a choice in what she decides to move forward with. Wow. So it's like you give them so much information and then it's like, well, I choose to go this way, but I know the reason why, as opposed to my mom is telling me to go this way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would definitely say
that was so good. You want her to know everything. Yeah. I love that. You want her to know everything so she can decide. I think it's great. And I have it on my Amazon cart, just so you know. And I was trying to get it here before our recording today, but it won't be here till tomorrow. But I can't wait to read it. I knew that was going to be your favorite, because I know it just really means so much to you, as well as Mackenzie. So I have some rapid fire questions for you. And if anybody's been watching this podcast with me for any amount of time, I love to do some rapid fire questions. So we talked about a lot of the the passion and the serious stuff. I do have some questions I'm not sure anybody has ever asked you. And I don't give my guests these questions beforehand because I want them to be a surprise and maybe catch you a little bit off guard. I don't think they will though. So the first rapid fire question I have is, what is your best piece of parenting advice today?
Oh, I've only been a parent for 7 months. I would say just take it day by day. There's no amount of books that could help with this.
No.
I think that I'm blessed to have my partner with me. So I'm not like, a single mom, but shout out to the single moms. My mom was. But he makes things way lighter. And it's like, I'm the type of person that, I make everything a big deal. And he's just like, oh, babe, just wait till she starts walking. So it's like, just take things in strides and just enjoy everything for the moment, because in a snap of fingers, it's over. She's moving on to the next thing.
I'll tell you, that's the best piece of advice. I'm just second that. I have a 21-year-old who was just engaged this last weekend.
Wow, congrats.
What do they always say? The days are long, but the years are fast. And that's the truth. You wake up one day and you're like, how am I even old enough to have an adult child? So that is great advice. Okay. So the next question is, what's one concert that you've been to that you will never forget?
So this is a serious question, because I've only been to one concert in my entire life.
Wow.
And that was actually 2 weeks ago for my birthday.
Well, wait, who did you go see?
We went to go see Jodeci, Charlie Wilson, and who else was it? It was like another group at Madison Square Garden, and it was the best. That was my first time ever. I usually try not to go to concerts because I don't like being so close to so many people.
Yeah.
But I've always wanted to, and he surprised me for my birthday and was like, "Oh, you're gonna love it." And I'm just like, "Where are we going?" And we get in front of Madison Square Garden. There's like people selling shirts, and I was like, "Is this the concert?" And he's like, "Yeah." Oh, New Edition was the other group.
You did not. Okay. Yeah. Let me just say, I've seen New Edition in concert as well, but you got to see them at Madison Square Garden. I'm just saying that that's a dream for me, is to see somebody, I don't even care who, at Madison Square Garden. That's awesome. Epic. I love that we now share this experience. I was in Lubbock, Texas. Shout out to all of you West Texans out there. Nobody really knows where that is, but New Edition did go there. Okay, that was great. So number 3, I know that you are tired. I know that you are weary. And so one of the things I want to know is, what does an ideal day off look like for you?
Oh, does that exist? Well, lately, an ideal day, I still get up early. Mm-hmm. The baby's typically up by 6 or 7 a.m. So the first few hours is just playing with her until she takes her nap. And then that's when I truly start my day, whether I'm turning on the laptop to get some work done, whether I'm reading a lot of books on culturally responsive teaching, whether I'm looking at videos. But believe it or not, on my days off, I also attend PDs. So it's what professional developments can I attend, or, if I have to support a friend who's doing some kind of presentation, I'm on it,
I believe it. I believe it. It's true. I think people like us, we have to be forced to take actual time off. And I think that just speaks to both of us. I know that you've said this before in previous webinars, but you are always learning, and you've always been learning since you were very young. And I think I relate to that so much because it's the same for me. And so a day of learning seems fun to me. If it can be in California at the beach, that's even better. But you're right, I'm still on my laptop. So.
That's the plus.
Absolutely. Okay, so back to music. This just tells you I love music. So what song is sure to have you dancing no matter where or when?
Oh, my family, we just did karaoke on Saturday. And for some reason, so when you go to Panama, they have these events, they call it Malecon. Mm-hmm. And it's like karaoke on steroids, right? They like put a stage out in the middle of the street, Everybody comes out, they have their beer, they have their food, and just random people go up and sing.
I love it.
When I was 15, and I stayed out there for the entire summer, there was this one song that every woman just kept singing, and they kept singing and singing and singing. And it's called Cuando una mujer, like, you know, when a woman, and it talks about breaking up with someone, believe it or not. But regardless of my mood, if you put that song on, I'm dancing, I'm singing, and you would not think it's a breakup song. Because of the fact that when I first heard it, folks were drinking, they were dancing, they were having such a great time that every time I listen to it, that connection of just having a great time
absolutely
just resonates with me. So on Saturday, I was like, what is the name of the song again? What is the name of the song again? And then I just started singing it, and I was just like, I feel like I'm back at home. I'm in New York, but I'm literally in Panama.
Isn't it amazing how when you hear certain songs, they can take you immediately back to a moment or a memory, and it's like you are just there again. I love that. Okay, so this is sort of a serious one, but I really want to know this, and I'm not sure you've ever shared this before, and if you have, I've missed it. But what is one student story from your career that you absolutely will never forget?
Yeah, I've never shared this. There was a student who was a seventh year graduate, and the last class that she needed was my class. But I knew that she was a high school student, but she was at a third grade reading level, second grade math level. So I knew that I had to be very strategic with whatever it was that I planned for her. She didn't need any standardized tests because she had an individualized education plan. So it was more of what could I create for her that not only would she be able to present, but she would have a connection with, and it still had to be tied to history. Right. So what I created was an amusement park project. I ordered Legos, and it was like roller coasters that you could get as well from the same Lego company. And I tailored this specific assignment just for her. And the idea was that she had to research different parts of history, and she had to name each roller coaster according to that part of history, right, at that time. So if it's a small one, what would you name and why? Is it a short period of time? You have to be very specific. And what choked me up was the day that she was supposed to present. So it's one thing to get a kid to complete some work. Sure. It's another thing to have them present, but they're not only presenting to you, they're presenting to a panel. And when it was time for her to present, she cried. And it was to the point where I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And she was like, I only want to present to Ms. V. So I was like, okay. I was like, everybody has to leave. But then I was like, well, who's going to know that she actually presented and earned this credit? So the principal like stood at another table and just like recorded the whole thing. And that's, I think, a moment that I would never forget, because this young lady still messages me. She still knows my birthday. She still asks how I'm doing. And I knew that at that time she had lost her mother and her brother, and her getting through high school, whether it took her 5, 6, or 7 years, she still made that goal for herself. And watching her sit and create these pieces of roller coasters and put it all together. And then I would have teachers come in different periods of the day to help her create it. So it wasn't just her by herself, because she had to read the instructions. But also I'm glad the instructions came with pictures. But this particular student, I don't think I would ever forget that, because I could think that was a part of my career where I was just like, I'm doing the right thing. Yeah. And that was like year 7 of me teaching, but I knew right then and there, I'm doing the right thing, because not only did I provide this way for this student to challenge herself and present her learning, she also had fun. She was able to still connect with teachers who sat down with her in my class to actually put things together. And then she presented it in a way where, you know, through the tears and everything else, she just said she had fun doing it. You know, she had fun reading, which we know that for a 21-year-old at a third grade reading level, they're having difficulties, but she's saying, I had fun reading.
That story is incredible. And what I love about it is it's like the beginning where there was that struggle and you, and she probably also didn't know how you were going to get to the end. And then in that full circle moment for both of you, it really united you for a lifetime. I have a couple of those stories myself. And the truth is, I think sometimes the students don't realize what an impact it has on us and on our life, and just on the fact that we chose to be educators. And sometimes in some years, it doesn't feel like you're making a difference, but it's those moments that are so powerful. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing today. Yaritza, you
Thank you for
are
having me.
incredible. I do feel like Oprah. I got a couple of things out of you that nobody's gotten out of you before. So that does make me happy. So we are going to link all of your information in the show notes. Make sure you follow all of the social medias. I think, you're on Twitter. I know that. Where can they follow you on Twitter?
At INC_YV, and it's the same for Instagram.
Perfect. Great branding. Thank you for joining us for episode 6 of the Women in EdTech podcast. We had so much fun today. Make sure you tell your friends to listen to this incredible episode, get a little laughter, a little fun, and some learning going on. And also remember to follow Wakelet on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on TikTok if you want to follow over there. I'm trying to think. We have YouTube. You can follow us everywhere. Make sure you do that, but also make sure that you go back and visit the Wakelet profile, wakelet.com/@the-Wakelet podcast. So you can go back and listen to all of the episodes. There's lots of series that we offer. This is just one of those series. I'm lucky enough to get to do this one. And let us know your feedback. Who do you want to hear from? We've had some incredible guests on our series. Today's really great. I am so thankful for you. I am so thankful for your sharing. You make me better every time I'm in this space with you. And I'm so excited to get to see you more often. I can't wait. I can see us like karaokeing and dancing.
Yes, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for sharing. And thank you all for joining. And we will see you next time.